I would like to introduce Hayley Bock from Jobs Ohio, who will moderate the next panel. Hi, Hayley.
All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Hayley Bock. I'm a project coordinator at Jobs Ohio, and I have the privilege of working with some amazing colleagues of mine joining us today on this panel on a daily basis through touching different facets of our innovation strategy. So I think we're still trying to pull up their screens here, but I'm joined by Andrew Dye, our Vice President of Strategy, Tyler Allchin, Managing Director of our healthcare sector, Tatyana Hauer, Investing and Strategy Partner for Jobs Ohio Growth Capital Fund, and Matthew Ellerbrock, our Research Analyst, who's going to be helping field questions today through the chat. So feel free to type out any questions as you have them. And if we don't get to them during the presentation, we will answer them at the end. So today we're going to dive into Jobs Ohio's innovation strategy, which was unveiled in 2020 and then rebranded last year as this three-pronged strategy. So we are going to start off with a video introduction to the topic and overview of strategy.
Give me some more. Give me some more of what you got. Give me some more. You give me such a thrilling ride. Take the rocket up to the sky. Take me high. Let's float into the universe. We're never coming back down to earth. No, no, no. Give me some more.
All right, thank you, Bob, for the help in sharing that video that was put together by our marketing team. I'm going to pull up some slides here. All right, so as we saw in that video, Ohio has had a long legacy of leading in innovation. So as we saw, Ohio has been a leader in innovation from, light bulb, first man on the moon. We have some great hospital systems here, but as we looked into it, Ohio was not sharing in its fair share of growth. So there are three key challenges that Ohio was faced with. One, we are under-indexed in high-growth sectors of IT and healthcare. These sectors drove 100% of net non-retail employment growth in the U.S., and Ohio grew at 60% of the national rate in these sectors. Second, we are seeing stagnant growth and shortages in in-demand STEM talent. And Ohio was even though we added the 12th most STEM degrees between 2011 and 2016, we were actually 37th in growth rate. So certainly not where we wanted to be. And then third, we are experiencing lags in growth capital required to scale up the startup ecosystem. And among 17 peer states, we were actually ranked last in venture capital in 2019. So due to this, we decided to put together our innovation strategy. Just another note on the talent gap. You could see here the supply and demand for talent, especially in Industry 4.0, engineering, tech, and life science occupations, is large and growing. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Andrew Dye, to talk a little bit about how we address these and dive into our first pillar of the innovation strategy, which is our R&D Center grant. So Andrew, I will monitor your slides here and kick it off to you.
Thanks, Hayley. Good morning, everyone. And special thanks to the Economic Development Administration and CSU for their partnership on this. Hopefully this will lead to new conversations and new opportunities. We live in a world of diagnosis and prescription. And I think what Hayley just showed was a bit of the diagnosis around where we needed to improve in our state's innovation ecosystem. And so kind of the initial prescription is what you see here. 3 different programs, which you're going to hear about now. I'm going to cover the R&D Center grant program, which has been around since 2016. And it's touched a pretty broad variety of counties across the state. And then the other members of the panel will cover innovation districts and growth capital in more detail. So why don't you click through to the next slide? So one way to think about the innovation pipeline is R&D, commercialization, startups, and scale-ups. And so I'm going to cover R&D. The Innovation District Initiative led by Kevin Chambers is something that touches all of this and involves a lot of placemaking initiatives. But if you click through, the Jobs Ohio R&D Center program was created in 2016, and it reflected all of our programs at Jobs Ohio reflect board approved parameters. And here you have to have 10 million of revenue. So that's the definition of kind of a lower middle market company and been around for 5 years. And you see 4 explicit goals: more R&D centers, access to funding for R&D, winning post R&D production facilities, and jobs and talent. We were pleased in 2019 to get the recognition from Brookings around the ambition of this program. This just provides a bit more detail on the parameters. We've done about $65 million worth of R&D centers. What we're funding is a percentage. Sometimes it's 5%, sometimes it's 15% of qualified research expenses of a new facility. And R&D takes longer than other activities in terms of outcomes. So we have a 5-year grant term. On most of our programs, it's actually a 3-year grant term. So this one has a bit longer. And you can see that on the right, we've done over 20 of these, and we're getting about 8 times leverage. For every dollar we're putting in, a company's putting in 8. Next. So these have happened all over the state, and in general, these are the focus areas of innovation. We spotlight 4 on the right. QED was the very first one we did in 2016. Mayfield Heights, middle market company, now part of Canon, but I think it was a 14,000 square foot new R&D center. In a more rural setting in Versailles, we put $5 million into Midmark's new R&D and tech center. Again, a great middle market company, longstanding Ohio corporate citizen. And then the other one I'll mention here is Andelin Biosciences. Tyler will cover this more, but they're actually in the Columbus Innovation District. And they were a startup a couple years ago, and we put in $5 million into that facility. So those are just, I'm a visual learner, and these just visualize some of the outcomes of these grants. So one point of clarity is that this is not for R&D projects, it's for R&D centers. And before Jobs Ohio got into this space, the state of Ohio operated a program called IRDCP, and those were also focused on R&D centers. But this is a definition we use that, it's a space or platform that's going to be enduring and it's going to be around for a while. And so this program is not a good fit if you have an R&D project, but it is a good fit if you have an R&D center and have a bigger vision for innovation in your company. So again, we've done 20 plus of these. We won't go name by name, but these were sort of the early vintage projects. And next, you can see an interesting mix, some in the auto sector, some in financial services, Cotsworks and Highland Heights, and optoelectronics. So these range from, large companies like GE to smaller companies like a Cotsworks. These are the more recent ones. Cincinnati Financial's R&D Center is another one that's in an innovation district. That's in the Cincinnati Innovation District. NovaGuard, you will hear about that as a feature tomorrow from their CEO. And the most recent R&D center we announced was Plastilini, which is in Washington Courthouse, and that's for sustainable food packaging, an international company. So that's the highlight, Hayley. I do have, I think, a final slide or two about how to apply if that's of interest. Our sector teams lead our evaluation of these incoming proposals. So if you're an auto company, you work with our auto sector team. If you're a finance company, you work with our financial services team. But these are kind of the baseline questions. What's the purpose of the center? What does success look like? Who are your partners? What are you trying to solve? And, how does this tie into the corporate strategy? And we have a template on the next slide that kind of just helps map out the numbers. Because ultimately these R&D grants have a contract that comes with them, and companies commit to numbers. So this is just an illustrative $50 million R&D center that has 15 million of payroll, 25 million of QRE, and 10 million of other expenses. So it's a template. We've seen much more detail in some corporate submissions, but this gives you a sense for what the due diligence looks like. So with that, that's the first pillar of our strategy. It's been around for 6 years now. And the newer elements of the strategy involve higher amounts of funding and a bit more risk taking. So I will pass it back to you, Hayley.
Thank you, Andrew. We are going to switch over to my colleague, Tyler Allchin, who is here with us in person. And so, Tyler, I will pull up your slides here.
Good morning. My name is Tyler Allchin. I lead our healthcare sector here at Jobs Ohio. Thank you to Cleveland State and EDA for hosting this morning. It's as a Clevelander, it's great to see that the programs and the talent that we have here in town are being showcased on a national platform such as this. So thanks for organizing and leading. I'm going to start off with just a slide that gives the audience a little bit of a look at Jobs Ohio more broadly, to give you a sense in a context of where we're coming from and why the innovation districts are part and parcel to our future success. As my colleague Matt mentioned earlier in the morning, Jobs Ohio is a private economic development entity covering the whole state, and we go to market in 10 industry verticals. And you can see here that we had a record 2021, up over 400 projects won, over 31,000 jobs created, and $1.7 billion of new payroll. A couple of healthcare highlights there that played a meaningful role in that success. And, we'll kind of come back to some right to win verbiage in our innovation districts, particularly in healthcare. You can see there by that corporate leadership at Amgen, Charles River, and most recently at Pharmavite, the types of talent and innovation we are attracting to the state. And we believe the Innovation District program will just accelerate that. Again, just giving some context, particularly as I head up the healthcare piece that is core to our Innovation District strategy, along with technology, which my colleague Ted would lead if he was here today, kind of giving these slides. It's equal parts healthcare and technology. We know that we've got a right to win in this space and have been winning because of the tremendous assets that we have on the ground here already. Led first and foremost by our clinical partners, Cleveland Clinic, #2 hospital, not only in the country, but globally, and then some tremendous leadership in the pediatric space at Nationwide Children's Hospital, and then just southwest of that at Cincinnati Children's. That's paired with a truly world-class research consortium across our universities statewide. Those featured here, obviously including Cleveland State. We are up over $1 billion of annual NIH and NSF funding, making us a top 10 research consortium. And then moving to the right half of the slide, you can see some of that corporate leadership, again, in the life sciences and healthcare space. And my colleague Tatyana Hauer is going to speak to our latest program that features and supports some of these life sciences early startups with our growth capital. But a couple of logos there to highlight. Andrew already mentioned Andelin Biosciences and Forge Biologics are two of our statewide leaders in the cell and gene therapy manufacturing space, which we're particularly proud of and have deep expertise in. All of these assets have powered, next slide, have powered, again, some great wins. Already touched upon our aseptic fill finish win that we had with Amgen, up over 400 persons just north of Columbus that we believe will eventually become a campus. And Sarepta Therapeutics, which has made an acquisition in the Columbus market, some technology coming out of Nationwide Children's Hospital, and has methodically moved the majority of their R&D team to the community. So again, just giving the audience a little bit of the intentionality and the goals of what we're doing, not only in healthcare life sciences, but as you can see, moving forward in innovation districts. And just quickly here, I think the talent piece has again been touched upon a couple of times, but we have a very high volume of STEM graduates, but the pace at which we're growing in that space, we know that we can do more, and that's a really high priority of the strategy moving forward. So even with a lot of those good victories that you've seen there in the research assets that we have on the ground, our board, our leadership under our CEO, JP Nassif, and our strategy team that Andrew Deye, who you just heard from, heads up, to their tremendous credit and leadership during the pandemic, decided to double and triple down in this space. And you can see here from this quote from our Lieutenant Governor, John Husted, we knew that we were doing a lot of good work in the healthcare and technology space, but to be, kind of truly a state of the future and win more than our fair share of jobs in the future, we had to do more. And the innovation districts that we're going to dig into now are very much a key piece of that. And again, one third of our overall innovation strategy. Hayley did a tremendous job covering these, so I won't beleaguer these points. But again, our innovation district strategy is part of a much broader plan. You can click forward to close the gap on a couple of fronts, primarily research coming out of our institutions, STEM talent coming out of our institutions, and commercialization, which again will be the Jobs Ohio growth capital piece. And placemaking is kind of the fourth bucket that the Innovation District program addresses. So when our group huddled and to use the verbiage used earlier, sort of the diagnosis that Hayley got into, and sort of what's part of probably not right now a cure, but a therapeutic moving in that direction. We knew that we wanted to go to market with our best and brightest institutions, our best and brightest leaders that head up those institutions. But what was going to be that criteria? What was going to define those partners that we did this with, and what would be the goals? So, this slide really kind of in direct and bulleted fashion gets into some of the things that we looked at and our leadership put to institutions that we knew we wanted to work with, but had to vet whether they shared these goals and shared the ability to go to market with us. So colleges and universities, you can see that commitment to a 3X around their STEM talent. You can see that we use the Carnegie R1 designation to decide whether a community could be in partnership with this program. Again, thinking of this as criteria for funding and then moving forward partnership to roll this out. You can see then as we got into the clinical institutions, a commitment around 20% annual increase in NIH NSF funding. Obviously with the theme of this morning's conference and tomorrow, that's a really, really big part of what we wanted to address. And frankly, we know that Ohio's institutions can win more than they're currently winning on the federal funding front. And then lastly, real estate. You can see that 10-to-1 match from the dollars that we're putting forth and that are also being matched by private dollars on the real estate side of things. And then on the 10-year outcomes, and we think this is pretty unique compared to other states around their institutions, is that incremental new job and STEM graduate piece that are 10-year goals that we're holding not only ourselves to, but the institutions that we're working with and we have funded to realize all of these goals. Next slide. As we pull back and take a look statewide on what this came out to be in terms of value and deliverables, before we quickly close with a look at each of the three innovation districts, what strikes us and I think really gets our partners and constituents excited about this is the overall impact, just the scale and how big of a swing these innovation districts are for us. Not only on the job front, but again, STEM degree talent. And, my colleagues on the talent side of things talk a lot about not only our talent pipeline being an asset for future wins, but also supporting the companies that we already have on the ground. Ohio has tremendous, corporate leadership in the healthcare space, in the IT space that's growing, it's emerging. But if we don't have that talent pipeline to support, we stand to risk losing some of those. So that's designed to cure a bit of that as well. We'll spend the next just quickly minute or two looking in a bit deeper at the partners that we went to market with. Irina mentioned the Cleveland Innovation District here, which Cleveland State plays a leading role in, joined by University Hospitals, Metro Health Medical Center, Case Western Reserve University, a top 25 biomedical research and medical school, as well as the Cleveland Clinic, again, a global brand on the care front. We feel particularly privileged to work in this mix. And all of these institutions, again, just giving a little bit more detail on how this program worked, will be receiving incremental grant funding in exchange for their commitments around research, multiple generation and STEM talent. Moving a couple hours just south of where we are this morning, we are going to market with the Ohio State University and Nationwide Children's Hospital. Nationwide Children's Hospital, globally recognized as a leader in the gene therapy space. They do north of $80 million of tech transfer revenue generation every year. So really on the cutting edge of that space. And the Ohio State, a top 5 public research university, generating a tremendous amount of STEM graduates a year. And you can see some of the numbers there that are really, really exciting. Collectively, those partners are going to market with over 250 acres just west of the Ohio State campus. And some of the real estate, including Andelin Biosciences that Andrew mentioned, are already coming out of the ground. And lastly, but certainly not least, as they were the first to break ground, the Cincinnati Innovation District is made up of partners including Jobs Ohio, Cincinnati Children's, a top 5 pediatric hospital, here in the States, and University of Cincinnati, tremendous on the medical device manufacturing and design side of things. Their first two buildings, named Digital Futures 1 and 2, one being a new core lab facility for the university, the second being industry space, are set to have the ribbon cutting here in the next couple of months. So we're particularly excited to unveil that and onboard new companies and tenants there that will work in the mix of research and development at both the university and the hospital.
All right, so for the third and final pillar of our innovation strategy, we have my colleague Tatyana Hauer on. And I think, Tatyana, you're going to share your slides if that's okay. So I'll let you go ahead and do that. And welcome, and the floor is yours.
It is a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Cleveland State, and thank you everybody in the audience and the Jobs Ohio team. It's a privilege to work together on this. I truly believe transformative mission for our state. So I would love to chat with you about the growth capital, our Jobs Ohio Growth Capital Fund, which has been launched in 2020 as I guess, if you will, a COVID response measure, as we have taken a look at our state and a variety of things that were, that needed our help and our support. And then it has evolved quite a bit since, but back in 2020, early 2020, we have launched it specifically to help companies that were best of the best companies that were in the midst of raising rounds, and as capital markets contracted, just found themselves in dire need of capital. However, since then, as I mentioned, it evolved. And as you know, as both Tyler and Andrew talked about our holistic innovation strategy and how a variety of different factors work together to build better, more innovative, more forward-thinking industries and the state. One of the massive pieces that we were missing and still are is the risk capital support for best of the best of our technologies. We have found that we have, and as you have seen, specifically from Tyler's presentation, so many world-class clinical and academic institutions that are highly ranking in IP production, if you will, that have tremendous world-class scientists. However, when it comes to spinning out the technologies into the commercial realm and then furthermore funding them, what we found here in the state is that we spin them out, we de-risk them at the very early stages, because we have some really terrific angel networks and kind of seed and pre-seed investors, as well as some of the very interesting special funds like ESP funds that are, I believe, just terrific in de-risking these early stage technologies. But what happens is we create the tech, we spin it out of the institutions, we find the founding teams, we de-risk the very early commercialization, and then we found ourselves in a situation where we don't have sufficient risk capital to fund farther, larger rounds. And as a result, we export these best of the best technologies to the coastal states, or just states with a more robust venture capital ecosystem. And it happened time and time again. And this kind of everything converged in our innovation strategy, where we took a look and said, is there a way for us to create a vehicle where we can fill some of this massive risk capital gap that exists in the state of Ohio, and create the impetus for these companies, best of the best companies, to continue growing, commercializing, and hopefully becoming wildly successful right here in the state. So with that, we created the Jobs Ohio Growth Capital Fund. And it's still a beta stage fund, risk capital vehicle, because we are, constantly refining and working on it. But we are a syndicate fund investing alongside professional risk capital investors. And I will get kind of to it a little bit later. It's very important that we align with professional funds, whether it's institutional funds or corporate venture funds that have track record in this space, that have domain expertise in a particular vertical. And we look for transformative, high growth, early stage companies that will become Ohio's next generation of great employers and intellectual property creators. As I mentioned, we have found that there is just simply not enough post-Series A equity rounds to fund these companies. And those are the rounds that are $10 million and up. Technically, a traditional Series A, even at Midwestern valuations, is still $10 million and up, which means, this is the funds that can write $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, $4 million checks. You typically on a $10 million round, a lead investor will take, let's say, 40 to 50% of the round, and then the rest has to be filled by syndicate investors, who just don't have enough of those funds in the state to do that. So that was the impetus for creating Jobs Ohio Growth Capital. This is our results as of end of Q1 of this year. So we have 56 portfolio companies. We've had 3 exits as we invest Series A and later. We have deployed $78 million. And I will get back to this number, which I think is extremely important. We have catalyzed, and that means either dollars invested alongside with us or following us, almost $500 million of additional capital to the best of Ohio startups, which results in a 1-to-6 cumulative leverage. We're very proud of this number. Again, this is the capital that does not, most of it came from outside of the state of Ohio into Ohio technologies that continue to grow and commercialize here in the state. That was a critical point for us. This is, I think, also very important. 45% of our portfolio are spin-offs from Ohio clinical and academic institutions. What a perfect way to layer this risk capital component on top of the innovation district strategy and R&D grant. And I will kind of further a little bit down in the presentation. Not only are these the spin-offs from the clinical and academic institutions, a lot of these startups are also located in those innovation districts. So it creates this wonderful kind of self-fulfilling prophecy, if you will. The startups are spin-offs from, let's say Cincinnati Children's or UC, and they're right there in this, a lot of them are right there in the Cincinnati Innovation District. Same thing with Nationwide and OSU, same thing with Cleveland Clinic and Case, Cleveland State, and the partners here in the Cleveland region. And this is our investment syndicate partners. We have invested with 63 non-Ohio corporate institutional VC firms and 18 Ohio-based venture funds. And we have learned, we've been around for just over 2 years. So we are vintage 2020, if you want to use the venture capital term speak. So we have learned who are good partners, who are partners that we will do deals with in the future and who are committed and share sort of the same vision. And then we have also learned some lessons along the way and are continually refining how we move forward. This is our unprecedented economic impact. This is where this metric I'm just so incredibly proud of. This is the capital invested in portfolio companies since Jobs Ohio investment. So this is our check either alongside other investors in the same round, or it's the follow-on capital that was attracted to these portfolio companies after our investment. So this is our $78 million And this is the almost $500 million that came in either co or follow-on investment. And the incredibly impressive part for me also is that 65% of that 489 million came from outside of Ohio. Yet all of these startups are still here. All of these, our portfolio is here. It's growing, it's commercializing here in the state. We're just very, very proud of this metric and hoping to continue to grow it as the time goes by. This is where our co-investors live. They located as probably quite predictable. We have quite a few folks that we've co-invested in the state of California. There's New York, there's Carolinas, the traditional well-developed venture capital hubs that exist. But I think another thing that really layers well into the three-prong innovation strategy is having strategic investors on our cap tables. So for example, Microsoft Ventures, TDK Ventures, Workday Ventures, Philips, Johnson & Johnson, Boston Scientific, Medtronic. We now just closed the deal with someone in a biohealth company that has GE as part of the syndicate. In fact, I would say 99% of our medical device investments have a large strategic on cap table alongside with us. And why is it important? Is because most likely, in most cases, that strategic is the final acquirer of this particular technology. And since the company is rooted in Ohio, is developing in Ohio, this becomes a great opportunity to attract this large strategic to the state post-acquisition. So it's an opportunity to plant another Philips flag, another J&J flag, another Boston Sci flag in the state of Ohio as commercial operations remain. We actually have, before this fund, Tyler knows this company very well. There was a company called Cardio Insight that in our prior life we have invested in and worked with. Cardio Insights was bought by Medtronic, and post-acquisition, the company ended up still staying in Ohio in Independence and has a small kind of research commercialization facility there. But it's something that remained here, is staying here, and hopefully can grow from there. 3 acquisitions, 3 exits in our portfolio. So far, all 3 of them remain in the state of Ohio. And finally, just a little patting ourselves on the back. We always ask for feedback from either our portfolio companies or our co-investors, because we'd like to know, are we adding value? It's very comforting and rewarding to hear that in fact we are, and we're doing exactly what we're supposed to do. Jobs Ohio continues to play a critical role in attracting out-of-state capital and securing the place for Ohio, best of the best of Ohio startups here in the States. So without really reading through all of this, this is just a couple of examples. And we are, 2021 was a groundbreaking year for us in terms of attracting venture capital. We have, I believe the number from our research team is 2.4 billion, which is, I think, double the prior year. And we have significantly moved up in the rankings, in national and peer group rankings, in the amount of venture capital that's deployed in the state. But there's still a lot of room to grow, massive room to grow, and we hope to continue building and continue refining. And hopefully, if we have this conversation next year, our venture ecosystem and kind of the entire innovation ecosystem can showcase yet another slew of terrific results for you.
One question I have for you, I know you mentioned that you're looking for the best of the best. But can you go into what factors you look at and are super important when deciding if a company is a good fit for growth capital?
Absolutely. That's a great question, Hayley. We are a syndicate fund, which means we never lead investments. We don't price investments. We just don't have the bandwidth to have this, the needed level of really rigorous due diligence. So what we do is we align with those venture funds that do it and do it well. And that's one of the main risk criteria for us, is to be able to have a lead investor who has track record, and not only in this particular space, but also in the has track record of exit. So for example, it is, Norwest Ventures, or it is Insight Partners for our Prior Auth Now investment, or Osage Venture Partners for our Nikola Labs investment. So that is extremely important, and we usually have we have in-depth conversations with the portfolio company that we are considering for investment. But more so, we have an in-depth conversation with that fund to really understand, are we going to be good partners moving forward? Are we aligned on the mission, how we want to grow this company? And is this a partner that, that can really deliver and stick around along with us for multiple rounds of financing? And this is usually another point, is it's a company. This is not we try to look, as I mentioned, we have capital sources for seed and pre-seed opportunities in the state. They're a little bit dispersed, but they're there. The risk capital is there because the rounds are smaller. The structures are really, light. But what we don't have is Series A and later. So we're looking for companies Series A and later with a really strong lead.
Thanks, Tatyana. That is our presentations, and now we're going to move into some questions I have for each of our panelists today. So Andrew, I'm going to start off with you. I know you went into the parameters, that are required for the R&D grant, and also covered the continuum, from startups to large corporations. We know that innovation comes from both small companies and large corporations. So what is the purpose of the $10 million threshold that's required for the R&D grant?
Thanks, Hayley. So again, we've heard about R&D grants, growth capital investments in the innovation districts, and for the R&D Center program, where we've invested about $65 million, each of those companies had, $10 million of revenue or above, and they had a track record of commercialization. In other words, this wasn't the first time they were trying to do R&D. And so that $10 million is sort of the definition of a lower middle market company. About half of the R&D Center grants we've done have been with middle market companies. And that's one of the ways we've evolved from the state predecessor program, the IRDCP. If you looked at that one, a lot of the money went to the just Fortune 500 type entities. And we wanted to make the program eligibility much more expansive. And so, again, it reflected the risk appetite at the time. We have different governance bodies, as many of you know. We have our board, and then we have the independent review panel, which reviews every single deal we do from just an independent perspective. And one of the things they have enforced, for lack of a better word, is, does the company have a track record of commercialization? Because that ultimately, that's what we're playing for, Hayley. We're playing for commercialization, so that if one of those auto companies has something pop out of its R&D center, we can put in a bid on the next plant that they're going to build, because we want both R&D to happen here and the manufacturing. So that's a little bit of the context.
And I think we've been able to see that in some of our proposals, where companies are, including both R&D and manufacturing, or have opportunities that, may appear a few years later for manufacturing due to the R&D that we were able to support.
Yeah, the other thing I'd say is, if you look at economic development as an industry, about 60% of the projects are manufacturing. And so what we're talking about today, it's a lot of healthcare, it's a lot of tech, et cetera. It's almost a way to balance our investments across the state, because the vast majority of our funds are going into manufacturing type project, whether it's an Intel or an Ultium cells in the Mahoning Valley. And so this innovation pillar gives us a chance to create a little more sector balance and put money to work in healthcare and IT and other sectors.
Thanks, Andrew. Tyler, question for you. I know you went into the anchor institutions and the outcomes that are kind of expected from our 3 innovation districts. So we're supporting each of those financially as Jobs Ohio. So can you talk a little bit about what those funds are going towards?
Happy to, Hayley. It's a great question. Maybe I'll start an example in Columbus at Nationwide Children's Hospitals. Their funding from us is specifically designed to support their attraction of principal investigators, so researchers and clinician researchers at their institution. They've been very public and intentional about their goal around recruiting 50 net new principal investigators over the next 5 years. When you think about the pace of the onboarding of those new researchers, being a little less than 1 a month, it's pretty amazing. And sort of the pace of that and what goes in that from an administrative and leadership and research function for us is really, really exciting. And you talk about kind of move the needle, that's an entire university or hospital's research function that anyone would like to have in and of itself. And Nationwide Children's Hospital is sort of bolting that on to their current world-class operation, which is really, really exciting. Coming back here to Cleveland, give maybe another example. The Cleveland Clinic has committed to build 3 new research buildings, one of which will be a new pathogen center of excellence focused on infectious disease. And I think over time will broaden out to biotech and therapeutics. You'll hear from their head of research probably here in a little bit, maybe a next panel or the panel after. So she'll get into that, which is really exciting. So it's a mix of both people and talent as well as real estate. Again, the third bucket being talent in the STEM space. The University of Cincinnati, again, first out of the gate with their innovation district. They're committing to a multiple around their STEM graduates and the students coming out of their programs. A 3x was what we pushed for with all of our university partners. And again, when we compared that to other deliverables at innovation districts, we thought we were getting really, really high ROI for our dollars in with our institutions.
Thanks, Tyler. And feel free, anyone, to add questions as they come up in the Q&A. Thank you, Tyler. Question, Tatyana, for you. I know you mentioned we're targeting Series A and later, and there's a lot of other funds out there. So what is the value add of growth capital, or what makes us attractive as an investor to a company?
Yeah, that's a great question. There are a couple things, and one of them is still a work in progress for us. But number one, we are, for other co-investors, specifically leads, building a syndicate that is a true team that's going to be committed to moving the company forward in a friendly, collaborative, non-contentious manner. That can be tricky, especially for really great opportunities. Everybody wants in. Folks have sharp elbows. What we pride ourselves on is the opportunity to be frictionless and efficient source of capital. Once we are comfortable with the lead investor, once we're comfortable with the technology, which we generally know and follow for a period of time before we execute an investment, we don't ask for board seats. We don't ask for special provisions in a term sheet. We generally adopt the terms of the lead. being similar to a corporate venture capital fund in a sense that we don't have private limited partners, so we don't necessarily have to look for raising the next fund and getting to aggressive performance benchmarks. We that allows us to really truly take the terms of the lead VC. Now, just as a quick caveat, even though we don't have limited partners, and we do have this flexibility, our board has a very specific return benchmark for us after 10 years. So we are driving to a financial return, but just not as aggressively as an institutional VC fund would. So for our venture capital partners, that's they just know they're going to have a collaborative partner without sharp elbows on a cap table with them. That's one. Two, for companies themselves, why do they care? Number one is because this is a source of local capital that is not going to, a large source of local capital. We can write checks up to $4 million, which is really rare in the state of Ohio. There's only one other fund that could do that. So having that source of local capital helps them alleviate the pressure of being closer to their funding syndicate, which is usually on the coast. So that's one, they like it. They, if they get a lead from California, they can say, listen, I can fill 40% of this round with Ohio money. We like it here. Our talent is here. Our homes are here. So please do participate, but don't force us to move. So that's one. Second is, and this is the work in progress for us, there is a terrific synergy between all of the projects that Jobs Ohio has done in the last 10, 15 years and will be continually doing in the space with established companies, with the institutions, with the OEMs, with the large world-class industrial companies. There is a tremendous synergy between what is done on the traditional economic development side and what these young portcos are trying to create. So what we are building this year and hopefully beyond is a systematized way of creating value from the traditional Jobs Ohio projects for the portfolio companies in the Jobs Ohio Growth Capital Fund, whether it is cohorts of early adopters, whether it's an opportunity to align corporate innovation with what these portcos are doing, whether it is getting advisory board members, whether it is just simply enabling commercial conversations between our portfolio companies and the world-class established Jobs Ohio projects. So we're hoping to unlock great value in that last point and are working hard to do it now.
And it's really a benefit for both. It's a benefit for our existing companies and these startups. So feeding off those synergies, I want to open it up to all three of you. Now that we've talked at length about each of these pillars, I want to open it up for some discussion on how these three pillars interact with each other and play with each other. So any examples? Feel free.
Yeah, Hayley, I think for our audience, again, Jobs Ohio, we've been around for 11 years. And, those first 7 years were exclusively, we were doing economic development projects in our 10 industries. And now we've built out an innovation pillar, a talent pillar, a real estate and sites pillar, and an inclusion pillar. And so there's kind of a mutually reinforcing dynamic between our sectors and these competitiveness initiatives. But specific to your question in innovation, I think I highlighted a couple ways that they've converged, like Cincinnati Financial's R&D Center in the Cincinnati Innovation District and Andelin Biosciences in the Columbus Innovation District. There may be more of that, but we realize that innovation isn't limited to specific parts of the state, and we want to support it in all 88 counties. So I think we have broad latitude with the R&D program, and I think there were good examples of rural and urban settings. But thank you again for being part of this. And Tyler, where do you see any kind of overlap in the three pillars?
Yeah, Andrew, I appreciate the opportunity to kind of give closeout comments here. I think what's really unique when we compare what we've rolled out to other states, is particularly with the Innovation District and the growth capital piece, is that over time we'll be able to offer both infrastructure and capital. And if we're doing our job correctly in those relationships with our world-class research institutions, continue to evolve, and they're on, kind of tremendous trajectories here, I think we'll be able to kind of have a seamless handoff between that research function and the fundraising function that Tatyana's heading up. And that ecosystem and that relationship is unique. And if done correctly, could be really powerful and give us even more of a kind of competitive advantage than we already have. So really particularly excited about those two pieces, and then ultimately, hopefully generating opportunities for the R&D grant. So it's not only, kind of that stool metaphor that we use, but also a continuum that you had up in an earlier slide.
Awesome. Thank you. And Andrew, I know you have a hard stop, so I'll try to wrap up here for you before 10. One last question from me before we open it up. Do we have a sense of, since we've unveiled this, it's really only been a year, 2 years, but do we have a sense of if and how the strategy is working?
Yeah. So, on R&D, there's generally a fairly long lag in corporate and public R&D data, but, we've held our own in terms of the rankings on R&D. I think Tatyana mentioned that we've improved directionally on VC. I think we're 15th out of 50 now, with a lot of room to continue to improve. And, in innovation districts, which Kevin Chambers is helping lead, we're very much on track on getting the talent expansion and the research expansion pieces, materialized. So I don't know, Tatyana and Tyler, if you would add anything else, but those would be my thoughts.
It's perfect.
Very well said.
All right. Going to open it up for questions. Irina, I know that you had a question for the group, so I will let you unmute and ask away.
So I basically have a little bit more holistic question, bringing us back to the framework we set for the conference. So you presented all this like specific programmatic activities, specific funding. How do you see this fit to a mission-oriented, invention-oriented, and system-oriented approach? And how do you see securing the continuity of what you're doing? Because harvesting and developing innovation as a perpetual process, it takes time. So, and we all know that we operate within the electoral times and political times and economic recession. So how do you see as an organization, as a powerful economic development organization, securing the continuity to what you've started with such an immense investments?
Dr. Lendl, thank you. For those of you in the audience, this is kind of a simplistic view of our 5-year strategy. We're in year 3, and it was kind of a doubling or tripling of our mission. So we have kind of authorized funding for this bigger mission for the next several years, but we want to goal and adapt as to what's working. So, I'm sure we'll continue to fine tune this blueprint based upon what's worked and what hasn't. Not all our R&D centers have been successful, and I'm sure there are things we would tinker with on the growth capital side as well. But the good news is, with the funding structure of Jobs Ohio, we still, as of next February, have 15 years left on the liquor enterprise funding, and we'll continue to try to find the sweet spot of ROI, inclusion, and sustaining these investments.
And from the growth capital perspective, I think the premise of it was and is to structure it and model it in such a way that it becomes an evergreen vehicle. And that's how we lead it, how we manage it, to become an evergreen vehicle versus just a point in time where it was a COVID relief fund or where it was a tranche of funding that came from Jobs Ohio balance sheet. So the intent here and the goal and the deliverables that we are living up to for our board of directors is create this evergreen investing in perpetuity vehicle with the thesis may change with time or adapt to the time's needs, but as a funding structure, it's intended to continue.
As I mentioned, Andrew had to hop off to head to another event in Springfield today, but I thank him for joining, and I thank my colleagues Tatyana and Tyler for joining as well to let us cover the strategy today.
Thank you, Hayley. Thank you all participants for your presentations and insightful answers to the questions and comments.